What if one of the most unsettling truths about modern existence was hidden not in technology, not in politics, not even in economics, but in the very act of being social? For centuries, human connection has been celebrated as the cure to loneliness, the foundation of community, the essence of our shared humanity. Yet one philosopher dared to suggest something profoundly dangerous, that for certain rare individuals, social life itself is not liberation, but torment. Arthur Schopenhauer, often dismissed as the great pessimist of the 19th century, uncovered what might be called the dark secret of society. He noticed that while most people found comfort in crowds, rituals, and small exchanges, others experienced the very same interactions as a form of subtle psychological violence. To them, the chatter of gatherings, the polite smiles of acquaintances, the endless calculations of status and advantage felt less like connection and more like slow suffocation. Schopenhauer saw what the world did not want to see, that human beings are driven by an insatiable will, a blind striving that turns every relationship into a silent battlefield. Underneath the mask of civility lies a marketplace of desires, ambitions, and disguised competition. And for those capable of perceiving this raw undercurrent, social life becomes unbearable, not because they are fragile, but because they cannot unsee what others comfortably ignore. Today, 200 years after Schopenhauer, this hidden torment has only intensified. With the rise of digital networks, with the invention of social media metrics and the endless performance of curated identity, what was once limited to salons, dinner tables, or academic societies has metastasized into a 24-hour theater of comparison and display. The polite intrigues of Schopenhauer's century have become the algorithmic addiction of ours. And while most people swim happily in this current of likes and shallow validation, a rare type of mind feels crushed by the sheer weight of inauthenticity. Why does this matter? Because in every era, those who resist the illusions of the crowd serve as the conscience of humanity. They reveal what the majority refuses to acknowledge. Schopenhauer himself became a solitary figure, choosing silence over salons, reading over conversations, philosophy over popularity. His withdrawal was not misanthropy, it was survival. He had seen too much of the theater of social life to keep playing along. This is not simply a historical curiosity. Psychology after Schopenhauer, from Freud to Jung to Nietzsche, repeatedly confirmed the same disturbing pattern. Freud observed that civilization thrives only by repressing instincts, creating a permanent tension between the individual and society. Jung described the suffocating role of the persona, the mask demanded by collective life. Nietzsche denounced the herd, warning that in crowds truth dissolves and authenticity is sacrificed. Taken together, their voices echo a single dangerous insight. Social life, far from being the safe harbor we imagine, can itself be a form of torture for those who perceive its underlying mechanisms too clearly. These individuals are not antisocial, they are not defective, they are in fact the rare witnesses of humanity's deepest illusions, and their suffering tells us more about the sickness of modern society than about their own weakness. So the question is not why a few unusual people recoil from today's culture of constant interaction. The question is whether their discomfort reveals a larger truth, a truth we have been too afraid to confront. In the early decades of the 19th century, Berlin was alive with the energy of salons, cafes, and intellectual gatherings. The city had become a stage for philosophers, poets, and scholars eager to impress one another with brilliant remarks and sharp debates. At the center of this cultural theater stood Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, whose lectures attracted enormous crowds. For many, attending his talks was not only about philosophy, it was about belonging to a movement, being seen, being part of the rising tide of intellectual fashion. Into this glittering atmosphere walked a man who would refuse to play the game. Arthur Schopenhauer, younger than Hegel and far less popular, scheduled his own lectures at the exact same time as his rivals. While Hegel's auditorium overflowed with eager students, Schopenhauer's room often stood half empty, the silence heavy and humiliating. The message from society was clear. His refusal to flatter collective illusions came at the cost of his own reputation. But beneath this apparent failure was a deeper truth. Schopenhauer was not interested in entertaining the masses. He was interested in exposing the mechanisms that made those masses behave as they did. He saw the hunger for intellectual fashion as just another form of the same will that drives people to compete for wealth, status, or beauty. For him, the crowded lecture halls symbolized not the triumph of thought, but the triumph of conformity. Imagine, for a moment, what it meant to live in that atmosphere, to walk through the salons where every smile concealed ambition, where every compliment was a calculation, where conversation was currency. The intellectual scene of Berlin looked refined on the surface, yet to Schopenhauer it was a breeding ground of vanity and performance. This was the same dynamic he saw in everyday social life. Beneath civility, an endless struggle for recognition, a quiet violence wrapped in polite words. History has preserved one particularly striking anecdote. At a gathering, Schopenhauer was asked why he seemed so dismissive of society, why he refused to mingle and build connections as others did. His response was as cutting as it was revealing. He compared human interactions to porcupines huddling together in the cold. Too close, and they wound each other with their quills; too far apart, and they freeze. For Schopenhauer, social life was this tragic dance, necessary for survival, but perpetually painful for those sensitive enough to feel its true nature. What looked like arrogance to his contemporaries was, in reality, the price of seeing too clearly. While others celebrated the energy of crowds, Schopenhauer endured it as torment. He had uncovered a paradox. Society rewards those who adapt to its illusions, but punishes those who expose them. His solitude, often ridiculed, was not weakness. It was the inevitable consequence of perceiving what others could not afford to recognize. This moment in history is not just a biographical detail. It captures the essence of why social life can feel like psychological torture. It is not merely about personal preference. It is about the fundamental tension between the individual who sees through the masks and the collective that depends on those masks to survive. Schopenhauer believed that the torment of social life was rooted in the restless will, a blind striving that turned even friendship into a subtle form of competition. In his century, this manifested in salons, banquets, and academic rivalries. But if he had witnessed our age, he would have seen his warning amplified beyond anything he could have imagined. What was once limited to gatherings and printed journals has now expanded into a global stage, illuminated by the glow of smartphones. Today, social life has become a 24-hour exhibition. Every moment can be documented, every interaction broadcast, every opinion ranked in likes, comments, and shares. The politeness and vanity that once filled parlors now saturate timelines and feeds, and while many embrace this constant performance as harmless entertainment, for certain individuals it feels like suffocation. The very structure of modern society has turned the private self into public currency. The danger lies not only in exposure, but in the psychological mechanisms this system demands. Algorithms reward conformity and punish nuance. Platforms encourage shallow approval, but rarely deep understanding. In Schopenhauer's language, the will has found a new costume: digital recognition. The endless scroll is not merely distraction, it is a competition for attention, for status, for symbolic survival. And those who are acutely aware of this undercurrent feel every click, every curated image, every forced smile as a form of violence against authenticity. Nietzsche would have recognized this too. He warned that the herd values comfort over truth. What are online communities, if not digital herds, forming judgments at lightning speed, punishing deviation, and celebrating sameness? Jung would have seen in it the inflation of the persona, masks multiplied infinitely across profiles, avatars, and staged photographs. Freud would have described it as repression turned into spectacle. the instinct to dominate and envy now expressed in filtered images of perfection. For the rare individuals who cannot easily numb themselves to these dynamics, social life is no longer just exhausting, it is torturous. To sit in a cafe surrounded by people glued to their phones, not speaking but broadcasting. To enter a workplace where professional identity is reduced to LinkedIn titles and curated success stories. To open a screen and be confronted with an endless parade of artificial happiness. Every one of these experiences confirms the same dreadful truth. Society has transformed into a machine that consumes authenticity and replaces it with performance. The collective calls this progress. Schopenhauer would have called it a more sophisticated prison. The torture lies not in noise alone, but in the fact that meaning itself has been reduced to exchange value. Relationships are measured in visibility, worth in metrics. Even solitude is invaded by notifications demanding attention. What was once the background hum of vanity in his time has become, in ours, the deafening roar of a culture addicted to performance. And here lies the true danger. Those who feel this most sharply are not simply antisocial. They are visionaries of disillusionment, forced to suffer for seeing too clearly. Their pain is not weakness. It is the most direct evidence of what society refuses to admit, that the very system designed to connect us is also what quietly destroys us. To understand why social life can feel like torment, one must look at the rare lineage of thinkers who dissected its hidden machinery. Each of them, in different centuries and with different languages, revealed a fragment of the same disturbing truth, that what we call society is sustained by illusions, and that to perceive beyond them is both a gift and a curse. Schopenhauer laid the foundation. For him, the will was not noble striving, but blind compulsion. Every handshake concealed ambition. Every friendship hid a negotiation. Every polite smile masked the claws of desire. He argued that human interaction was not built on harmony, but on rivalry disguised as civility. To those attuned to this truth, the laughter of a party or the excitement of a meeting did not feel warm. It felt predatory. Schopenhauer's pessimism was, in reality, radical honesty. He forced us to see that the very stage on which social life unfolds is rigged against authenticity. Freud carried this observation into the depths of the psyche. He insisted that civilization itself depends on repression, the silencing of instinct so that crowds can coexist. The cost of this repression, however, is neurosis. What polite society calls good manners, Freud called sublimated aggression, the office smile, the corporate pleasantry, the cheerful small talk. All to him were evidence of instincts caged and redirected. For the sensitive individual, to participate in this choreography is not neutral. It is to suffocate under the weight of denied impulses, both one's own and those of others. Jung saw another layer. He described the persona, the mask each person must wear to function within society. To attend a dinner, to engage in workplace rituals, to participate in family gatherings, one dons a face that conceals as much as it reveals. This mask is not optional, it is demanded by collective life. But for certain rare types, the mask grows unbearable. To wear it feels like treason against the deeper self. Jung warned that those who cannot reconcile the mask with the authentic core are doomed to exhaustion, or worse, alienation. For them, social life is not support, it is exile within the crowd. Nietzsche, finally, declared war on the herd. He observed that in groups, truth dissolves into consensus. Individuality flattens into conformity, and strength is sacrificed for comfort. The herd, he said, would rather be wrong together than stand alone in truth. In the modern world, this manifests in online mobs, viral trends, and collective outrage, all evidence that the herd is still alive, only louder and more instantaneous. For the individual unwilling to surrender thought to collective agreement, the pressure is suffocating. Taken together, these thinkers converge on a single revelation. Social life, celebrated as connection, often operates as performance, repression, and conformity. Most people adapt to it with ease. But for the rare minds who cannot dim their perception, who see beneath the masks, every interaction risks becoming torture. Not because they reject humanity, but because they demand a humanity truer than what society currently offers. Schopenhauer hinted that only a small fraction of humanity perceives the true weight of social life. Later thinkers expanded this intuition, recognizing that there are distinct psychological types for whom society feels less like community and more like captivity. These rare types can be described as archetypes, figures who embody different ways of experiencing the torture of the collective. 1. The mask breaker. This type cannot endure pretense. Where others politely smile and play along, the mask breaker instinctively notices falseness in tone, posture, or intention. They see the subtle calculations in small talk and cannot pretend it is genuine. Their clarity makes them unsettling companions. They refuse to cooperate in the unspoken game of social lies. Schopenhauer himself was such a figure, rejecting the polite dances of Berlin salons. 2. The silent observer noise drains them. Gatherings, office chatter, or endless notifications feel like sharp needles against their mind. They are not shy, they simply perceive overstimulation as assault. Modern technology has made their condition worse. Every ping, every buzzing phone is another layer of social demand. Nietzsche would call them spirits who guard their strength by refusing to waste it on triviality. 3. The truth teller. These are individuals who break the unwritten rules of positivity. They question when others demand cheerfulness. They point out contradictions when silence is expected. Their refusal to play the game of shallow encouragement makes them scapegoats. In Freud's terms, they expose the repressed aggression that others conceal under civility. For them, every just stay positive is another chain tightening around authenticity. 4. The status rebel. Where society thrives on hierarchies, job titles, follower counts, networking value, the status rebel feels nothing but disgust. They refuse to measure human worth by numbers or symbols. In the age of social media, they are the ones who sense the toxicity of comparison most vividly. To them, every like is a reminder of the will to power masquerading as friendship. 5. The solitude seeker Jung might have called them natural individuators. For this type, solitude is not loneliness, but medicine. They withdraw, not out of hatred for people, but because silence is the only environment where they can breathe. To society, they appear antisocial. In truth, they are protectors of depth. History is full of such figures, thinkers, writers, artists, who transformed solitude into vision. 6. The conscious outsider. The rarest and perhaps most tormented. They live in permanent exile within society, too awake to ignore the illusions, too human to detach completely. They participate just enough to survive, but always with a sense of distance, like actors trapped in a play they did not choose. Their life is marked by existential loneliness, not absence of people, but absence of resonance. Schopenhauer called this the fate of those who see through the veils that others need in order to live. Each of these archetypes embodies a unique way of suffering under the weight of collective illusion. They are not broken. They are not failures. They are signs, living evidence that what society celebrates as normal can, for the rare few, feel indistinguishable from psychological torture. It is tempting to think of archetypes as rigid categories. You are either the truth teller or the solitude seeker, either the mask breaker or the conscious outsider. But human psychology is never that simple. Archetypes are not boxes we live inside. They are patterns that live inside us. Most people carry several of them at once, though one may dominate more strongly at different times of life. A person may spend years as the status rebel, rejecting the false hierarchies of career and social networks, only to discover that in solitude, they also carry the essence of the sacred seeker. Another may feel like the truth teller in friendships, exposing shallow positivity, but find themselves becoming the silent observer in larger crowds, overwhelmed by noise. These shifts are natural. Archetypes are not prisons. They are mirrors, reflecting how different facets of the self respond to social existence. Yet no matter which archetype comes forward most clearly, each carries its own dangers. For the mask breaker, the danger is alienation. By refusing to tolerate pretenses, they risk constant conflict or exclusion. What they see as honesty, others interpret as hostility. The price is being misunderstood, even feared. For the silent observer, the danger is withdrawal without return. Protecting themselves from noise, they may slip too far into isolation, losing opportunities for meaningful connection. What begins as necessary rest can harden into exile. The truth teller faces the danger of rejection. Their insistence on naming what others avoid makes them the target of resentment. They become the scapegoat, blamed for bringing discomfort, even when their words point to reality. The status rebel often confronts the danger of invisibility. By refusing to play the games of recognition, they risk being ignored entirely. Their refusal to compete protects their integrity, but it also cuts them off from platforms where their voice might matter. For the solitude seeker, the danger is stagnation. Solitude heals, but it can also paralyze. In choosing silence, they may deprive themselves of the friction that fuels growth, leaving them trapped in thought without transformation. And for the conscious outsider, the danger is despair. Seeing too much, belonging too little, they hover at the edge of both worlds. The risk here is not just loneliness, but the belief that their difference is meaningless, that their gift is only a curse. The tragedy is that these dangers are not the result of weakness, but of sensitivity. They are the natural consequences of perceiving what society hides. Archetypes reveal not defects, but directions, different ways in which the rare individual collides with the illusions of the collective. Understanding this prepares us for the deeper question: how can one carry these burdens without being destroyed by them? Is there a way to transform torment into strength, isolation into vision, exile into meaning? The answer lies not in denying these dangers, but in learning to integrate them. And here begins the path toward catharsis. Schopenhauer warned that to see too clearly is to suffer. Freud admitted that repression poisons the individual who refuses to conform. Jung showed that masks suffocate the soul when they are worn too long. Nietzsche thundered that the herd devours authenticity. Each of them, in their own way, circled around the same torment. Society can crush the very people it most needs. But here lies the secret they also left behind. Torment is not the end of the story. It is the raw material of transformation. What feels like torture in the moment can, with consciousness, become the fire that forges a rare kind of strength. Jung called this individuation the process of turning the wound into wisdom, the exile into a path. Instead of letting the mask destroy you, you learn to wear it lightly, to remove it when needed, to remember it is only a tool, never your essence. Instead of drowning in repression, you learn to channel instinct into creation, into art, into truth. Instead of despairing at the herd, you carve your own values and let them stand, even if you stand alone. Schopenhauer's porcupines may always prick each other, but what he did not see is that awareness of this dance allows us to choose differently. The rare ones do not have to freeze in isolation or bleed in closeness. They can learn the rhythm of distance and intimacy, weaving solitude with authentic connection. This is the catharsis, the recognition that the very sensitivity which makes society feel unbearable is also the proof of extraordinary perception. To feel tortured by shallow interactions means you are wired for depth. To recoil from endless noise means you are attuned to silence. To resist the herd means you are capable of thinking beyond it. The world does not reward this easily. It will misunderstand you, dismiss you, perhaps even punish you. But history shows us that every age's renewal has come from those unwilling to surrender their vision to conformity, from the solitude of philosophers to the struggles of artists, the exile of prophets to the silence of mystics. Humanity has always depended on its outsiders to carry the truth. So let this be your turning point. You are not a victim of social life's cruelty. You are a witness to its illusions, and that makes you part of a lineage of rare souls whose very existence proves that authenticity still survives. If you want to explore not just why social life feels like torture, but how one might begin to stand against it, not as a checklist, but as a deeper reflection on escaping these invisible chains, write your thoughts in the comments. I read them carefully, and they guide the content I create. Stay awake, stay rare, and remember, what feels like torture is, in truth, the beginning of freedom.